Hello and welcome in to another episode of Tater Talks, the podcast where Tater talks gaming, content creation, sports, pop culture, current events, and whatever the hell we want. I am your host, Devin, but most of you know me as TaterBoy09. For those of you who do not know this side of me, I am a variety content creator who streams 4 days a week right here on Twitch and posts videos to YouTube, including this podcast and highlight videos. My guest tonight is someone who I've Oh, excuse me. I choked on my own spit there. My guest tonight is someone who I have done work with in the past with another podcast and YouTube channel. He is the most tatted person I personally know, and he loves his kittens more than life itself. Give it up for my friend, the sportsman himself, Matt Weber.
Hello.
Hello, welcome in. How are you doing today, buddy?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me. I'm super stoked to hang out and just chit chat with you, buddy.
That's right. And you're already getting gift subs in the chat, so hey, that's
I
a
know,
positive.
God, goodness gracious. I feel so welcome.
Yeah, that's how it is over here.
I feel so welcome. Yeah. That was quite the intro too.
I really do like the saxophone music. It's just, it really hits you in a certain spot.
Howdy, I am in the mood.
It's the only way to get in the mood, in my opinion. Anywho, we got a great show tonight lined up. We got a few talking points that we're mainly going to revolve around the sports category. But first and foremost, I do want to ask you, your name in Twitch and most things is it Sugundies? Is that right?
It is. And I won't ever correct anybody just because the beauty in the name is the subtlety, That's my screen name for most my gaming tags and all that fun stuff. So it's just a grand old meme.
It is a good meme. It really is, especially when it comes to the internet. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if you could lock down one of those good funny little name tags, you just gotta hang on to it.
Yeah, exactly. Do you remember what your first or one of your first tag name was, or your first usernames that you used on the internet was?
Well, so like. I'm going to plug my Twitter here. And I always used to use Weber Will, which is just my last name. But I used to be Cuckabunga for a while there. But then Sugundies just kind of, I realized it was open one day and it stuck.
I remember when we were working on our other project, which is Infinite Roundabout, by the way, shout out. We had a few Fortnite videos, which are actually pretty funny. You can still find them lurking around on YouTube somewhere.
Those were good videos.
Those were good. I still watch those from time to time, just like, hey.
Those were good. I'm proud of those.
Well done. But I remember your username in that one was Bensel Sharpino, so that's a...
That was a one-off. I hadn't found my way. I hadn't found Sugundies yet. And
you hadn't quite found it.
Bensel Sharpino will always be part of my heritage. It's always my origin story.
That's right. When we get the comic book of Sugundies, we'll see that name one of the first and foremost.
Hell yeah.
Well, I do just want to remind everybody that this podcast is streamed live on twitch.tv/TaterBoy09. So be sure to follow the channel just so you know when the show goes live. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're watching this on YouTube for weekly uploads on Thursday mornings. That's right. Tomorrow morning, this will be live in case you want to watch it again, or if you just want to click a thumbs up and a like or whatever. I'm still getting used to all the YouTube stuff. It's crazy. Speaking of your Twitter handle, where can people find you at?
I'm most active on Twitter, which my handle is WeberWillDTD. That's WeberWillDTD. And my Instagram handle is the exact same thing, but my Instagram is a lot more of just my kitties and my lady. So
everybody go follow the Instagram is what you're saying.
Yeah. The Instagram is the wholesome content. My Twitter is a lot more me complaining about sports and politics.
Isn't that kind of what Twitter's for, though?
Oh, yeah. It's a bunch of angry liberals about something.
I remember I joined Twitter when I started basically streaming, which was a few years ago. And then when I first got on there, I was like, wait, there's no censorship here. This isn't like Facebook. What's going on?
It's wild. It's a Wild West.
It's pretty nuts. Anyways, like I said, we got a great show tonight. We're going to be talking about a lot of the current sports, which we've kind of talked about before on the show, but more what I want to talk about is the side that maybe nobody's talking about. And it's not only just like will there be a season, what should they do, because there's some plans that are put in place. We'll go sport by sport, what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, but what I really want to focus on is also the players. I want to talk about how maybe some of the players feel about this. So just kind of a second opinion, because I mean, some people, for some of the topics right now are all about, is it going to happen, when is it going to happen, and when do I get my sports back?
Right. Totally.
But people aren't thinking about, do these athletes, well, of course they want to play, they want to get out there, and they want to feel that joy of what their whole career is based around, but more importantly, some of the ways that they're going to have to go about doing it. So first and foremost, let's talk about the NBA. Let's talk about the NBA first and foremost, because they're the ones that probably have the most ready plan in place.
Yeah, it's a good one. I mean, like they're it's of the crazy COVID strategies are coming back. It's the most sensical, I would say. I mean, it's just they're not making it too complicated, but there's definitely a lot more players speaking out in the NBA about it, just because it's a touchy subject, and it's a lot of people. It's kind of crazy, as a country, COVID has affected us in such a strange way. We're kind of in this weird state now where COVID has ravaged the country, but the fear is no longer there. So there's a lot of people who are just like, let's get on with it. Let's just have sports back. Let's start the playoffs and just to get it over with. But I was actually paying attention to I think it was Stephen A. Smith, and they were talking about creating this bubble league, which they ended up doing in Orlando and setting up this bubble league. But they talk about how much people or how many people would be involved creating a bubble league. You would just have the players and coaches. You'd have training staff, you would have equipment staff, you would have the film crews and production crews, and just they said that, like, an event like this could take upwards of thousands of people just to put this on.
Yeah, and we're not supposed to have more than, I don't know if the rule's in place still, but hey, you're not supposed to have more than 10 people. Is that at least that's the rule for our area, which is Lincoln, Nebraska.
I think it's a little high. Yeah, 1,000's a little high, just
a little bit. So so if anybody who doesn't know, what the NBA is planning right now is they're planning on doing a 22 team playoff. I believe it's 22, right?
Yeah. Well, essentially, they've ixnayed the teams that won't make the playoffs. The teams that are clearly out aren't going to be invited to the bubble league. What's going to happen is they're bringing 22 teams into this bubble league, and they're going to hypothetically play out the end of the season so that they can actually get a tournament seeding up. So all the teams' current standings will stay, but they're going to play, I think it was like eight games to determine the rest of the seeding. To actually play out in the playoffs later.
And that's real. Like, that's a real thing that could be potentially happening. Not all of these other ideas where people are talking like, well, it could be this, could be that. Like, that is something that's in the works. And from my understanding, they're just trying to get some of the teams to accept, really, from what I understand.
The association, the NBA and the Players Association have come to an agreement. So, like, this thing, their plans actually in effect right now. Players from over out in the globe that aren't native to America have started traveling back to America. Training facilities are opening up. Teams are starting to train. But the biggest holdout we have right now is there are specific players, and these are high-profile players who have a spot in the Players Association as well, who are kind of given some pushback, and a lot of players are threatening to sit out, essentially.
Was that like Kyrie Irving? Was he one of the ones that said he didn't want to play?
Yeah, Kyrie Irving's the big one. Kyrie Irving and Dwight Howard have basically they have taken a stance to not play for the NBA, and the Kyrie Irving, Bleacher Report just put up an article not too long ago, just a couple days ago, that he's saying to heck with the NBA, and he's calling on the players to start their own league and just do their own thing. And Kyrie Irving's a pretty radical dude. He was a and he's a suspected flat earther.
He's a flat earther.
Yeah. He's a pretty wild child. He's a very outspoken man. Uh, he basically, he told the NBA that, trying to start this league back up is, essentially insensitive, with everything going on, with COVID going on, with the current Black Lives Matter movement that's going on. He says at the end, there's no time to have basketball, essentially. And then he's saying players should hold out and just do their own thing and use that platform for the Black Lives Matter stuff, which, it carries some weight. I'm not going to, who am I to disagree with him? But it's just that's a tall order.
It's a tall order, especially just for one person to say, and then maybe it does catch some steam. But I think that from what I heard also, is that LeBron's planning on playing.
Yeah, and that's where Kyrie's kind of stuck, because, like you said, LeBron says play, and 90% of the league is going to follow his lead, because LeBron is literally the king. What LeBron says goes in that league. Whether you like him or not, it's just it's LeBron's league right now. And that's the one thing about the NBA. The players are so much bigger than the teams themselves.
Right. Yeah. It's so true, especially because kind of a weird offshoot comparison. But did you watch the Michael Jordan one?
I didn't get the chance to watch that.
The documentary.
My fiance and I have been kind of planning our wedding and going through a bunch of other crazy stuff, but I have seen snippets of that.
Yeah, and that was one of the things. So, something that I never realized was that Michael Jordan got one of his deals when he was coming out of college, directly out of college. So that just proves to the point where you're like, it is bigger. It is bigger than just the players are bigger than the actual organizations that they're in, because that's just a fact.
Right.
Air Jordans blew up.
I mean, LeBron James is bigger than the Lakers, which is crazy, because the Lakers are
the historic franchise,
the most historic, probably one of the most historic franchises in sports, period. And LeBron James carries more weight than the Lakers do today, essentially. So, like you said, LeBron says jump, and the NBA says okay, and they're going after it. And this is purely from a fan viewpoint, but I think the NBA, their plan is to, in early July, they're going to do some scrimmages and have a training camp, essentially, for the teams that are going to be there. And then late July, it's just going to kick off, and we're going to have NBA playoff basketball in the middle of summer going into fall. And their target end date is late September going into October, possibly, which the NBA season usually starts in October.
It's over right now. This is, I looked it up. We would be at game 6 or game 5 of the NBA finals right now if the season had continued the way it was, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on right now. I called you a self-proclaimed sports fan. I didn't mean that in a negative way, because you are a self-proclaimed sports fan.
Oh yeah,
it is. We're all sports. Most of our friends are all about football, and it is what it is. I'm the same way. But all around, I watch everything: basketball, soccer, which we can talk about that too. I didn't even think about that. But soccer, sure. NHL, whatever.
Yeah,
drunken cricket. You'll watch it. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, if there's some form of competition, I'll find a way to enjoy it.
That's right. So right now is supposed to be one of the NBA Finals games.
Well, yeah, this for me personally is the pinnacle of sports, because obviously the NBA Finals would be starting or coming to a close, and the Stanley Cup would be right there with it.
Right.
And it's just I'm used to personally watching some of the most fierce competition in sports this month, and it's just been so bizarre. and like it's weird.
Yep.
It's just weird, man.
It is weird. Everything's weird right now. I would say that one of the only times that I really even watch basketball is in the NBA playoffs. Basically, after
Mhm.
the first round, I'm ready to watch everything. I'll watch all games of the NBA finals, but that's like the only time. I watched Kobe's last game front to back, but that's probably one of the few games that I've watched front to back as an NBA
R.I.P.
game. Yeah, RIP.
Yeah, dude, and it's like I don't know. It's just one of those things that the NBA isn't as popular where we're from in Nebraska because we're a football town. But that in my opinion, and hockey's by far my favorite sport. But I think the NBA is probably the most well-run machine in like the major sports world in America at least.
I would agree. And one thing is that because it starts with their commissioner. Their commissioner
Exactly.
is Adam Silver. Adam Silver, right?
Correct.
Yeah, he is one of the more progressive commissioners in sports today,
Hmm.
and it really shows. He was one of the first to approve. I think it was marijuana being
Hmm.
okay as like a non-exempt drug or something like that.
Yep.
He was right there as soon as the Black Lives Matter stuff started. I mean, he has always been on top of it. And
Well,
he has my respect as being on top of and progressive and ready to go when things get
yeah,
hairy.
yeah. He's just always stood by his players. He understands that the players are what make the league, and it's just he doesn't step in the way of that. He doesn't have to put a muzzle on anybody essentially.
And it's one of those things where like he knows where the money is coming from, but he doesn't make it seem that way. He makes it he does I should say he doesn't do it in a way like that. He does it in a way because he knows what's right and not necessarily what's going to keep money flowing, what's going to keep his house mortgage paid and stuff like that.
Right, right, right. Yeah, I mean, like, no one feels bad for a commissioner of a major sports league. You
Right.
know, Th those guys make millions of dollars just to keep a well thriving business afloat, essentially. But it's just like, like you said, kudos to Adam Silver. He's a pretty progressive guy, and he just doesn't see, why, unlike say Roger Goodell, you know, he doesn't, well, there's no point in punishing players,
Right.
for such minuscule things. It's just like players are allowed to express themselves, and that's why you see a lot of these NBA players who like are involved in so many things outside of the NBA. These guys get shoe deals, they get commercial endorsement deals all over the place, and I mean, like, like I said, I stand by. I think it's just probably the most well-oiled machine when it comes to sports.
Yeah, I would agree. And I also think that one of the things that helps that is maybe this isn't true, maybe it is the amount of players that are on a team. I don't know. It just brings so like, let's say, for example, in correspondence like the NFL, right? So you're averaging like 12, 15 players on an NBA roster as opposed to 55 on an NFL roster. So that just brings down the amount of people that need to be I don't want to say anything like negative. I don't want to say like coached or like rounded up basically, but you know what I'm trying to say where it's like
Well,
it's the least amount of people. It's not as
yeah,
much people that you need to be in charge of, I guess would probably be the best way to say that.
on its face, the NBA has like these small. I mean, on average, NBA players are paid higher than any other athlete in all of sports, and it's because just like what you said, there's fewer players to a roster, there's fewer players to a team to be managed, and it's a lot smaller scale compared to the NFL, where like you said, there's 50 plus players on a roster in the NFL at any given point. Um, and that's where it's like I think it was kind of easier for that league to thrive because they don't have to budget as much, I guess, is what you'd say. But that's where it gets kind of frustrating, especially coming up as an NFL fan. The NFL, they've been doing at least taking huge steps up the cap room, but the cap disparity between positions and like just like the gap is just crazy. So you got a quarterback who's getting paid almost 40 million a year, and then that his salary is worth more than all other 10 players on his side of the ball combined. And so it's like, I get it, quarterback's the most important position, but how far is too far? How is it worth paying a certain player that much? And that's a different topic. That's a separate subject, but
it still is in line with what we were saying. Just the
right.
amount of difference. Well, what it really wraps around to is how the NBA is a little bit better of a built organization. In my opinion, the one thing that I really like about basketball, and the one thing that I really like about like the way that a basketball game flows is, there's 5 different positions technically.
Right.
However, you're still doing one goal. You're still shooting. You're still trying to make it in that basket. That is your goal, right. As opposed to football where you're okay, you got one guy his job is to throw the ball. You got one guy's job who is to block, the line. Another guy's running back or fullback, There's so many different positions, so many different kind of specialties. In the NBA, I understand that there's differences, but really what it comes down to is ball in the hole.
Yeah, put ball in net.
Put ball in nets.
I mean, like, it's true. And like, with the NBA, there are certain guys who could play every position with ease.
And there are people that are opposite of that too, that can't. Like Shaq couldn't play anywhere other than center.
He didn't need to.
He didn't need, right. That's the thing, is he didn't need to, but it still runs in line with, hey, right. His job was to get it there. His job was to get it there. Point of the matter.
Right. And it's just the NBA is just one other thing I like about the NBA and how they run their salary cap. Pardon the stutter there. They make it so that there's a max contract essentially, which you don't really have in the NFL. So there is a limit to what you can pay a player, and that increases over the years. Like the max contract inevitably goes up. It's just like that in baseball as well. So you can essentially, depending on how you balance your team, you can have like 2 or 3 players who are scripted to a max contract.
The Lakers.
Right. And so like when it comes to like that in the NFL, I'm an advocate for that. Maybe make it so the quarterbacks can be hit with a max contract, because then you wouldn't have like this crazy competition and salaries amongst players. Because that's what I mean. It's turned into this giant pissing match in the NFL, especially where the quarterback like Dak Prescott sees what Russell Wilson's getting paid. And he's like, hey, I'm putting up similar numbers to Russell Wilson. I'm the same kind of quarterback as Russell Wilson. And so he expects that money. I don't think he's as good as Russell Wilson. I see your face on the stream. I can tell you agree. but that's what it is, And so like in the NBA, obviously LeBron James deserves to be the highest paid player, but he's not. He's paid he's paid incredibly well because he's got a max contract. He'll get a max contract wherever he wants to go. But you also got other guys who can earn a max contract, and it's an attainable goal. So I just think, I think that's the way to do it. And it all circles back to just how, Adam Silver has just kept this machine running. He works with the Players Association, and they get stuff done. And I firmly believe we will inevitably have, an NBA postseason in the middle of August, but I think it's going to happen, and it's going to be weird. It's going to feel weird, but I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I think that they said that the finals match or whatever they plan on is going to be the same Sunday night as an NFL Sunday night game. So it's going to be like, hey, you can watch these 2 games at the same time.
Oh, that makes my brain melt.
It's not enough TVs in the world. B-Dubs is going to be overran.
Right. I'm going to have to hook up a couple TVs and monitors in my house just to watch everything.
Exactly. Well, let's move on to the NHL because they're doing something kind of similar too. It was at least announced. I haven't seen anything on this one recently, but their thought process was we're going to do the same idea where they're going to have 8 teams from each conference or something like that, and they're just going to play out one big playoff.
So there's it's a lot weirder, and I'm not a huge fan of it as a hockey fan. You know, they've essentially committed to the the round robin tournament kind of play, where they're bringing in 24 teams, so it's 12 from each conference, and they've taken the top 4 teams from each one of those conferences and they put them in the kind of the these teams have made the playoffs table. And then the remaining 8 teams are in their own table. And these are teams that were kind of coming up to possibly getting a playoff spot, but weren't quite in the playoff picture just yet. And teams that were wild cards or just not high seeded teams. And they're gonna have these teams basically duke it out in these round robin tournaments to just set the seeding order.
Chat, are you guys writing this down? This is a lot.
Yeah, it's wild, and I'm not a huge fan of it. It's overcomplicated. The NHL has essentially tried to wash. They just watched the rest of the regular season. They're like, regular season's over. Where we stand is where we stand.
Yeah.
My problem with that is, so like in the NHL, the way they do their tournament seeding throughout the regular season is they accumulate points through wins and overtime losses. So a win wins you 2 points as a team. A loss grants you 0 points, but a loss in overtime grants you 1 point. So if you win a ton of games, if you lose minimal games in regulation and lose games in overtime, you score a lot of points, and that's how you get seeded higher. Tiebreakers, obviously, they eventually go towards records. So if teams have the same point numbers, but whoever has more wins would obviously take the cake there. But the problem I have with at least this comeback idea, and I mean, there's no right way to go about it. Honestly, it's with everything that's going on, it's unprecedented. But essentially, so my favorite team, the Boston Bruins, they were on a franchise year. They had one of the best seasons that I've ever watched them play. They were on top of the league, and they were leading the second place team, which was in the same conference, by almost 10 points. So essentially, Boston would need to lose 5 games, and that other team would need to win 5 games to just tie them in the standings. So Boston had this incredibly commanding lead, and they were almost guaranteed home ice throughout the playoffs, however far they would make it. Now, that's gone. It just comes down to this round robin tournament where whoever does the best in this round robin, that's who's going to get the number 1 seed. And it especially sucks because, they put the 4 best teams in each conference against each other. I have all the faith in the world in my boys, but now we're competing. We went from having a pretty weak end of the year schedule to having to compete against 3 of the best teams in the league just to secure our spot. And it's kind of hairy. But it's just this big dance, and they're going to seed everything out. And then they're going to, before they eliminate everybody, they're going to have like best of 3 series and best of 5 series just to, make it right. There's going to be so many hockey games. It's going to be ridiculous.
Well, yeah, they're going to have to do something like that, especially if all the playoffs that normally happen in hockey are, best ofs. Then you're going to have to do it again. You can't just have a big playoff with a bunch of people and then you're like, sorry, 1 loss, you're out. Bye. Sorry.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, yeah, I get it. And like I said, it's no matter how you do it, it's going to be hairy because they don't have the time frame right now to basically play out an entire playoff and set the seedings. So they did what they could to make everybody happy. And it's easy for me and my team, being from the top of the heap, to just be like, let's just start the playoffs, forget everything else. But,
sure.
You strip a lot of those teams who didn't have the ability to play out the rest of the regular season to get to the playoffs, because that stuff does pay. Clubs make money for playing games later in the season. And at the end of the day, it's just about making money.
Right. How do you think the players feel, though?
I haven't heard a lot. I haven't heard a lot of opposition, and I think it's just a difference in kind of culture. The NHL is definitely a worldly game. There are players from all over the globe who play in the NHL. From what I've seen, a lot of these guys are just excited to get back out there. It's, I mean, hockey, in my opinion, is probably one of the most team oriented, violent sports out there. Like, it's so fluid, it's so fast. Half the time people who don't like hockey, they don't watch it because they don't necessarily understand how the game's played. And I get it, because if you don't know what you're watching or looking for in a hockey game, it just looks like a bunch of guys skating around in circles chasing this little black puck, and then eventually find its way into a net. But like, to me, there's just so much like literal blood, sweat, and tears that go into the sport that I think the players themselves just love the game that much that they don't care. They just want to play.
Yeah, and it's also a little bit different, especially if you're leaving your own home country to come play somewhere else.
Right.
I feel like there's a different feel to that.
Right. And yeah, I mean, there's a couple guys on my team from Sweden and Slovakia, and they've been in Europe. They've been spending their time out in Europe right now because that's their home, and they're over the moon to get back here and start playing hockey again. But it's just, I mean it, man. Once they get this thing going, there's gonna be games, multiple games on every day. These guys they're gonna play more hockey than they ever know that they wanted to play.
It's kind of funny. We've been so deprived of sports, but now they're just going to throw tons and tons and tons back to us, assuming that things will work out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still not holding my breath for anything to be going. I'm still not even holding my breath for an NFL season. So
yeah, I mean, yeah, it's sad to say that, but it's true. I mean, like, just a little peek into the personal life. My fiance and I had our wedding planned in late June here, and
it was next weekend, wasn't it?
It would have been next weekend. Yeah, our wedding was supposed to be next weekend, and Katie and I were talking about that, and it's just such a trip. We were just like, oh man, well, we were supposed to get married here, in just like 10 days. So, it's been weird. It's just been so bizarre, and early on, in February, nobody knew what to do. There was no guidance. It was just kind of like, oh, yep, there's a new virus going around. Everybody needs to know about this. Play it safe, and to us, we're like, okay, June wedding, we should be okay. They started talking about doing social distancing and all this stuff, and like late June wedding, we should be okay. But then it just seems like as a country, we never got a break, and like this virus just kept spreading, and it happened in the NBA. Rudy Gobert had his little incident with the microphones, and like that shut the NBA down, and like it became so serious so fast. It was like, COVID-19, this virus is here, be wary of it, and then like a week later, it was just like shut the country down.
Yeah, yeah. Earlier in a podcast, when I had Connor on, actually, I gave him 3 dates, and it was March 11th, March 12th, March 13th. March 11th was the day that Fred Hoiberg got sick, and that was when the day after that was, or those were the same days actually. That was the day that Fred Hoiberg got sick, on the side of the Big Ten championship game, or the Big Ten conference tournament, I should say. And then that was the same day with the whole Rudy Gobert thing, and then the next day, the NBA shut down. The March Madness was canceled. And then the day after that was when Trump declared a state of emergency. So it was March that those were the 3 days that basically changed the whole landscape of what we would see as sports for the next, we're still here. Or it's going to happen in July. Still going into July.
I mean, like, I remember hearing them talk about canceling March Madness, and I was like, no. There's no way. The March Madness is like a cash cow for the NCAA. Yeah, I don't have the numbers to this. I would like to probably look it up, but I would venture to guess that March Madness probably makes more money for the NCAA than any other event that they put on.
I don't know for certain, but I know that it's around, I think it was around like 50 or 60% of their entire revenue is on March Madness.
Good Lord. And that's, but it makes sense. It makes sense. It's literally a month-long ordeal.
Yeah. Everybody watches it. Everybody takes, I had time off work to go watch it.
Right. And yeah, all of a sudden you start rooting for these colleges or
Yeah.
schools that you never heard of, and like
Yeah.
you become passionate, and it's so easy to get swept up in it. Even if you don't care for basketball, everybody likes March Madness because it's just an insane tournament. It's an insane tournament, and it in my lifetime, I don't know if they've ever canceled March Madness ever off the top of my head,
No.
but like
No.
all of a
There's no
sudden
way.
it's just like this huge event that is just like a staple in our sports culture. Everybody knows what March Madness is. It's just gone. It's done. It's not going to happen this year.
It had to take something like this to cancel it. I mean, there's other things that probably have happened that we're thinking like, well,
Hmm.
maybe, but no, this is what it took. It took something
Right?
as crazy as this to do it.
Yeah, yeah. It was a shock, and like obviously one day, this will be in history books. They're going to talk about what happened in 2020.
2020. It's gonna be
March
a
Madness.
it's gonna be a chapter long. It's gonna be one of those ones where you spend a whole like
Yeah.
4 months on it or something like that.
Yeah, it'll be an entire semester course, and you just study the year by a quarter at a time.
I don't know. I don't even know if that's enough. I don't even know if that's
Oh,
enough.
it is kind of crazy. I mean, off the topic of sports, just like how much chaos has just ensued this year, and it just seems like, I mean, I know everyone feels this, and you see it in memes, and you see it in the news, and it's just like every month or it feels like every week now. Something is just altering the course of history.
Yeah.
And it's like such craziness.
Yeah. Who had murder hornets on their bingo board?
uh, I saw a meme the other day. It was something about how the after switching to the Gregorian calendar, uh, it didn't account for 8 years and lost time, and hence the Mayan calendar was actually correct in predicting that the world would end in 2012. It was just 8 years off because of the time change in the Gregorian calendar.
Oh no.
It's a meme, but like, I was like, oh, yeah, it feels a little too real.
Yeah.
It's been crazy, man. And as someone who, I think if anyone was to ask, hey Matt, what's Matt's favorite thing to do? And 90% of the people who know me would say, watch sports.
Get
And
tattoos.
right, yeah, watch sports and get tattoos. Fortunately, I was able to go out and get a tattoo this weekend, which was nice. But
Yeah.
still don't have those sports, and I mean, it's kind of been a blessing and a curse. I've been able to go out and do a lot of different things, and like find a couple hobbies that I'm into, and it was actually probably the big push I needed to get into esports too, which is something that I never really gave the
Yeah.
light of day. But the esports scene, which I'm the furthest thing from an expert on, is thriving. And like I've been watching the Overwatch League. I've paid attention to a couple uh, various streams that Blizzard's put on with like their Hearthstone, which I is just so I got into Hearthstone, man. Like I don't even play the game, but I was like, oh man, this is intense.
Well,
This is intense.
it's not even games like that too. So they had NBA players playing 2K
Hmm.
on ESPN for a
Hmm.
month, for like a month long.
On
That
ESPN.
was their content, was hey, we're
Yeah,
gonna have these two players play each other in a video game at their house. They're just gonna be online, and that's our
yeah,
content. We're just gonna play that.
yeah. Took a play right out of Twitch's playbook, huh?
It really is. It really is. Like, hang on,
Yeah,
wait. There's this Twitch website. What does that do?
right.
People just play
I mean,
video games and they watch? What?
one of my favorite sports podcasts that I don't I don't listen to podcasts super often, but when I do, it's the Tater Boy podcast.
Well, of course.
But but I listen to Spit and Chicklets. It's a Barstool podcast that's about hockey,
Hmm.
and they've been doing that exact same thing. They'll do a player podcast where they get a player to come on, and this player will just play NHL with one of the guys from the podcast, and that's like their content right now.
Yeah.
And it's exciting because it's just like, oh, competition, sport, good. Oh,
Did
I'm
you
just
see?
ready. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, did you see the simulation for the Huskers red white game that they had?
No, I didn't. I meant to watch it, but I didn't actually sit down and watch
It was pretty wild. It's pretty wild.
it. Yeah, it's on just like a Husker subject, man. It's you know I'm fearing that we won't get a college football season, which I you know, as I've lived in Lincoln for the last couple of years, college football has slowly crept into my favorite form of football. You know, and don't get me wrong, I love the NFL still, but
Hmm.
something about those Huskers, man. You know, I want the Huskers to be successful, but then you know, we had 3 rough years, and then
Yeah.
this. Ugh.
Well, let's talk about how college football is getting affected by this real quick, because they did just announce that it was like an hour before we even started the podcast that they announced that there's a 6-week rollout plan for basically what would be training camp for college teams.
Uh huh.
So if they're going to be starting at the beginning of July, around then, and it's just a 6-week program of they can't play, they can't practice or be in contact with people for more than 20 hours per week.
Mm-hmm.
Which I don't know how long practices normally go and stuff like that when it comes to college football. I don't know how long practices are, but they said is about 20, you can't have more than 20 hours worth of contact, but that doesn't include like game time, game films or anything like that, or meetings, strategy meetings and stuff like that. Just pure actual contact. They're not going to let you have more than 20 hours per week. But then really it's just going to be like, hey, let's get these players in shape. Let's get them with their team. Let's get them trying to go
Mm-hmm.
so that really what that entails to me is that, hey, we're planning on a season starting. We are planning on it happening. This is your time to get it going. This is your time to get ready for it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and you got to lay these plans out.
We
But
have to.
the worst thing about it, is, I mean, and it goes with all of these sports. You know, basketball, hockey, football. Uh, until you do it, we're not going to see the effects of it until it happens. So it's like, even if the NBA kicks off, even if the NBA bubble league starts and like they get it going, there's a real world chance that someone's going to contract COVID, a player or a coach might inevitably contract COVID, and then they have to shut the whole thing down again. And I mean that could happen anywhere. And it's just, you know, as much as I love sports and I so desperately want sports to be back. You know, I'd be lying if I told you I wouldn't be
You
excited for the stuff to start up in July. But like, you got to be real. You got to be real. You know.
got to be smart about it.
Well, yeah.
Well, I guess you can be as smart about it as you want to be, but you still have to. It's just the whole thing. You still got to make money off of it. You still got to provide entertainment. I mean, there's people.
Well, just like anything else, you know, these leagues are a business. You
Right.
know,
Yep.
and they're hemorrhaging millions of dollars because they're not able to perform their business. And you know, obviously, like nobody feels super bad for sports players right now and teams because you know those guys are rolling in the money. But like, think of the impact that this could have on professional sports as a whole in the future. You know, we're sitting right now. You know, you and I were talking about it earlier. That Major League Baseball, we might be staring down the barrel of no baseball this year,
Mm-hmm.
and they've had issues with their commissioner and the Players Association working out a deal, and it's just like, you know, if the MLB goes without a season, that's tons of money that's just gone.
Well, that kind of sets the standard too. I think it's going to set
Mhm.
the standard for, well, maybe you know if they're not doing it, then and they're not very much contact. I mean, they're basically the furthest thing from contact, except if they're in a dugout.
Right.
Maybe it's not the right way to go.
Well, I mean, and baseball was one of the first sports to come back in Korea when this thing, you know, started happening. And you know, at least with the MLB here in America, it's a matter of money, you know, and we very well could see the MLB get drove into the dirt. Like I wouldn't be surprised, and this is just complete speculation, but like, yeah, say we don't have a season, all of a sudden people are, you know, managers and teams are going to start wondering, you know, all right, how are we going to play contracts? You know, there's going to be contracts that are going to be expired, players who aren't getting paid. players who are going to want money to play, but they're not going to be able to dish out money because their money's tied up in contracts elsewhere. We very well be looking into a holdout after that. And, the MLBPA made, they'd have to, essentially the MLB is probably going to have to put up millions, hundreds of millions of its own dollars just to salvage this mess.
Yeah, probably not hundreds of millions, probably billions. We're talking about in the billions of dollars right now. If they're just going to have to pull that straight out of pocket.
More money than I could fathom.
Yeah, more money than probably any of us will ever see ever in our lifetimes combined times 1,500. Well, okay, so we talked about some of the good, right? So we're kind of heading that way anyway. So we talked about some of the good plans that are in place with the NBA and the NHL. So I do want to bring up with the MLB and then what we might look at for the NFL. But before we jump into those, I do just want to remind everybody that this podcast is available on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, and more for completely free. That's right. It doesn't cost you a single dime to listen to this on any of those platforms. But if you do want the hassle of trying to find it, there's a one-stop shop link for all of these. If you type !podcast in the chat here on Twitch, or you can go to tatertalks.buzzsprout.com, and that will have the podcast there itself. It will also have all of the links available for Spotify. You name it, it's all there. It's all in one link, and it's super easy. Shout out to Buzzsprout for being the podcast that is hosting this, or the place that's hosting this podcast, I should say. Thank you. Appreciate it. It's a great website. I'm already on there for 3 days, and I love it already. So shout out to them. Shout out to them. More importantly, let's talk about now who is the potential worst commissioner in sports that's not named Roger Goodell.
Surprisingly enough.
I don't know his first name. What's his first name?
Rob
Manfred, who's a name that I just learned today. So that's something that's kind of interesting. But MLB news is changing by the second, it seems like, by the almost minutes.
Oh, you got to refresh Twitter just to keep up with it.
We were going back and forth. Matt and I were going back and forth this afternoon. He was like, all right, here's something that, I sent him a screenshot of something. I was like, all right, here we can do. And then he sent me a screenshot back. It's like, saying that my screenshot that I sent first was like, sorry,
it's already wrong.
it's already old news.
I literally just got a tweet notification from Ken Rosenthal about the MLB trying to open up another deal.
Oh my goodness.
Literally, we're not kidding about this.
This is live. This is happening right now. 8:49 p.m. Central Standard Time on June 17th. It's happening. But basically the last thing that they were proposing was a 60-game season, and then you're paying the players on a pro rata basis, which is basically we're going to prorate you for 60 games of whatever your full salary is.
Mm-hmm.
And the NBA or MLB, excuse me, was instantly like, no, we're not going to risk that for what is 162 games. So that's like 40% of your total contract.
And it, like you said, they've been negotiating this for days now. And at one point it was 100 games. The next day it was 90 games. The next day it was 72 games. And then it was, it's just like it keeps dropping. It keeps dropping. And it's like, Rob Manfred, he just keeps throwing shit at a wall. Pardon my French. He just keeps throwing this at a wall and hoping it sticks. And obviously players associations were set up for a reason. And you can't have professional sports without the players getting what they're entitled to, essentially, in their contracts. So, there's an issue. Let me bring up a specific instance. One of my favorite baseball players, he used to play for the Red Sox, Mookie Betts, got traded to the Dodgers in the offseason because he's due for some money. He was the AL MVP not too long ago. He won a World Series with the Red Sox. He's a fantastic ball player, probably my favorite player in the league still, even though he's in the wrong colors. He was guaranteed a decent chunk of change. It wasn't a max contract with the Dodgers, but he's getting paid substantially less than what he should be, in my opinion. He will be an unrestricted free agent at the end of this year. So, like, from his standpoint, you know, if he's getting prorate on his contract, he's getting shafted out of the money that he deserves more of, period. And then two, the Dodgers as an organization just got stripped of a trade, you know, because they're not gonna. It's not guaranteed he's going to be back there. The Dodgers cap is tied up with the millions of dollars they've invested in all the other players. You know, the Dodgers are in a full World Series or bust mode. You know, they've invested millions upon millions of dollars, and you know the MLB. For those who don't know, they've structured their cap space with a no cap. Essentially, there's no cap on their salaries, so there is a max contract, but if the club makes enough money to pay players, they will pay whatever they want to get these players on board. The only deterrent from that is what they call a luxury tax, essentially. So there technically is a cap, but if you go over that cap, you have to pay a luxury tax to the MLB, and it's how they make more money. And it's just a whole, you know.
I did not know that. That's hilarious.
Yeah, and it's crazy. So
hilarious.
It's like, in Mookie Betts' specific instance, you know, you got a guy who is probably worthy of somewhere near a max contract. You know, could probably get it with a lot of teams. I think his contract this year is only $25 million for a season. You know, max contract guarantees you up to
only 25, yeah,
33 or 34, right? Yeah, but and you know, it really kind of throws clubs under the bus because you know the Dodgers have essentially they've already paid into that luxury tax. You know, they're well over that cap space, so now they're talking about prorating these guys' contracts, but keeping luxury tax money, and the clubs and the players aren't having it. And like I said earlier, we're looking at a holdout. I would not be surprised if the MLB does not have a season this year.
Especially with how much things are just changing. They're trying to now that we know that. I mean, they're just trying to shortchange people, especially with Betts. He's gonna get fractions of what he deserves, right. And then like you said, not only does he get screwed, then the Dodgers get screwed too. Especially if you're doing this as a full win now situation, like it's just. Right. So messy on so many different levels.
Like on its face, you know, it makes sense to prorate their contract.
It does.
It makes sense. If you strip away every small detail when it comes to setting up this comeback from COVID, setting up a prorate contract doesn't seem crazy until you start picking the hairs. Until you start splitting hairs and picking it through it. It's you know, and the problem is you know the MLB. In the offseason has already cashed in on all of this. You know, clubs have set their rosters, clubs have paid luxury taxes, players have moved around, contracts have been set, and then the MLB is just like, we're going to keep this money, we're going to keep all this stuff that we've already charged you for, essentially for a full season. You know, because essentially think of it as like a club's operating fee to be a part of the league. You know, right?
Yeah.
You know, just as where I pay you money to play in our fantasy league. You know, imagine if you would say in like, all right, Devin. All of us gave you the buy-in money for our fantasy football league. Well, for some reason, you know, COVID knocks out the NFL. We don't have a fantasy football league except for the last 6 games of the season. Well, and then you'd be like, well, since we're only playing 6 games, we're going to prorate the end of the year prize pool to, you know, 33% of what it would be, and then you're just going to keep all the other money. And it's just like, wait, what?
Well, as commissioner of our fantasy league, I'm actually starting to think this is a good idea.
All right, man, Fred.
Yeah, I already get called Commissioner Thanos in that league anyway, so it is what it is. Snap of my
Power
finger
to the people,
and
man.
I'll just take that trophy right back.
The bourgeoisie will rise again.
Something that, other than money related, that was brought up, I think it was Mike Trout that brought it up, who's one of the prestigious, you know, players.
He's essentially the LeBron James of the MLB right now.
Would it be Wouldn't Bryce Harper be a better comparison, or would?
Oh, Bryce Harper's Kyrie Irving. He's big now.
Okay. Okay. I just remember there was a big snap about him being, you know, him taking that
he got
record-breaking deal or whatever.
he got a max contract with Philly, and it was controversial because he didn't deserve it. Homie can barely play outfield, and he hits dingers sometimes.
Tell me how you really feel. Tell me how you really feel. But anyways, Mike Trout was, I'm pretty sure is Mike Trout because I remember the name and I committed it to memory. But his wife is pregnant and she is having a baby. She's having their first kid in a month. And his thought process was, well, why would I go risk going out and potentially getting it first and foremost, for getting COVID first and foremost. And then second of all, why, if she was just having her baby, then would I have to, maybe I wouldn't be able to go directly to the hospital when it was happening or something like that.
Right.
If I did, maybe I'm putting the baby at risk, putting the whole hospital at risk.
Well, and his specific case is, specific to him, but that's exactly it too. We talked about the NBA, we talked about the NHL, and they've set up contingency plans. These guys I know in the NBA, I follow Inez Cantor on Twitter and Instagram. He's probably one of my favorite personalities in the NBA. He's kind of given me kind of an inside look on like what it's like for the players, and he's getting tested for COVID pretty much weekly. He's getting that long swab up his nose every week, and these players are getting tested weekly. And there's these strict rules, like the teams right now can't practice as a whole. So it's like he's a center for the Celtics. He goes in and they practice with the centers only. There's only like 3 or 4 guys out there, these bigs practicing, and then the other guys come through and do their thing. And it's very strict. It's very, very strict. The NHL is the same way. Players are coming back, but they're only filing in. Everything right now in the NHL is voluntary. So players are just following in. They have to follow strict codes. Got to keep distancing. You can only have I think it's like 3 players in the locker room at a time. It's crazy. And the MLB's got none of that. The MLB's just like, well, we're just going to play. Yeah. And then Trout brings up a great point where he's just like, why would I risk going out there,
yeah, he's
traveling.
He's got money for the next year that, hopefully things can calm down a little bit.
All these guys do. I mean, none of these athletes need to play. All these guys have millions of dollars, so eventually, I mean, part of it's the love of the game, part of it's to make more money. It's just, with the MLB, we're getting no contingency plans. We're going to play baseball. We're only going to play this many games. We're only going to play, and there's just no contingency plans. There's nothing to essentially protect the players, and no matter how you feel about this virus, I'm all in favor of erring on the side of caution. And like I mentioned earlier, we very well could see COVID break out again in this bubble league in the NBA or in the NHL, where they're actually going to travel in the NHL. And it's like, it's going to bring it all to a screeching halt. And I wouldn't be surprised to see it happen, and we'll get stripped of it. Like I'm as much as I want sports back, I'm not holding my breath. It's crazy. It's just crazy, man.
The thing with the MLB is that the MLB was already have started, right? Like they would be
right. They would have started in
yeah, it'd be over a month in then.
Yeah. They would have played, like, teams probably would have played upwards of 40 games by now.
Right. Which, yeah. So it's not like the MLB is already sitting here, they're not like the NFL. The NFL is starting in September. Screw NFL, you can just say screw the preseason. We don't even need it. Play 1 game, who cares, to test the waters. Mm-hmm. Sure, whatever. The MLB is in their season right now, and they're not making any plans to play. They're trying to come up with plans, but they're coming up with, from what we're understanding here right now, unfair plans. Period. End of story. There's no left or right about it. These are unfair plans that they're getting for not only the fans, but for the players as well.
Right.
Stupid.
It's just
getting all heated
hard
now.
Right. Well, and I've been on Twitter. I follow a lot of personalities, for baseball teams and different sports, and everybody hates Robert Manfred right now because it's like no one's mad at the MLBPA because they've got the players' best interest in mind, and I don't think that most people are going to be upset with players wanting to err on the side of caution. And everybody wants baseball to come back, but I don't have all the answers. It's hard. I don't know if it's going to happen. I don't know if we're going to get a championship year for the NBA or the NHL. And even right now, as we talked, we may not even see a start to the NCAA football season or the NFL's football season. There's been rashes of COVID breaking out amongst NFL clubs. Like,
Yep, I was going to bring that part up. Yep, so the last week, I believe, is what we found out that multiple players they said several is what ESPN reported from Houston and Dallas teams. So the Texans and the Cowboys that had all tested positive for COVID after several of those players, including Zeke Elliott, which I thought it was weird that they were like, oh, look, all these Cowboys players and all these Houston players got tested positive. But Ezekiel Elliott also got positive. Like, now we want to pay attention.
And he's got name recognition.
Yeah, I know they're looking for that. But then they were also talking about how the Houston college football team, 6 or 7 players of theirs had symptoms and then later tested positive for it. So the thing with that is that, Texas has opened up. Texas has been opened up for a minute here.
Right.
And now we're seeing this. So, I mean, maybe it is going to be the sad ending that we're all going to get.
Well, and I got a notification from Shefty today on Twitter about a Broncos player had tested positive for COVID. And so, and I feel as if it's inevitable, I hate to sound so depressing and so pessimistic about this, but it is, it's true. We're just kind of stuck like in limbo, and as much as I want sports back, I keep saying this, it just may not happen. And it's just not a real plausible thing right now.
I think at this point we could potentially, we're kind of going back and forth on what we think, but I think that we could potentially still look at some sort of something coming back. I think that what we need to realize right now, though, is that there's no way in hell that you're going to go to a game.
Oh no.
You just need to get that out of your head right now.
And in all of these, I think in the NBA, I think they did write a guideline in the NBA comeback about how the only people who can attend games in the playoffs, and it will be late playoffs. So it's not even like the early seeding. I'm pretty sure it's like they've limited it to like the later rounds of the playoffs. The only people who will be allowed to attend games is direct family and guests of players who they can invite, essentially.
Right.
But other than that, you're looking at like nobody. We'll be watching games with nobody in the stands. And I think that's going to go across the board, period.
Yeah, at least until a vaccine is found, which is probably not going to be this year. So another thing.
Well, I mean,
we'll just be pessimistic about.
Well, you know what it is. I have seen like articles about how there's been a lot of universities who've found a potential vaccine for COVID.
Yeah.
But the problem is like they've done the testing. This vaccine here does kill COVID in this isolated experiment. Now we have to submit this through the FDA, and we have to get it tested extraneously. Like it has to. We have to get various symptoms. We have to get and it's not the creation of the vaccine that takes so long. It's the extensive testing that needs done to confirm that this disease will be safe for people. We can't just announce that we have some miracle pill that'll cure COVID because people on their face, people are panicky. We're lemmings, man.
Toilet paper. Did you have toilet paper for a bit? I didn't.
You know, I was lucky enough. Katie and I had bought a massive. We usually buy a big old thing of Angel Soft every time we need it. We had bought Angel Soft probably 2 or 3 weeks before like the toilet paper hype came around. So it's just like we were like, oh man, but we were, even then, we had toilet paper, but even then, she and I couldn't help but worry, like, oh God, are we gonna run out of toilet paper?
Yeah.
Fortunately, I can confirm we didn't.
Great.
Oh,
if
man.
there's one silver lining to the podcast today, it's that.
Yeah, that's that. I was able to wipe my ass every time I pooed in the last couple months.
Asses were clean. Asses were clean.
Partially, I'm not a great wiper.
I'd say it. I said it as soon as all this toilet paper stuff started happening. I know you're probably for it too. If Americans were socially, if it was socially acceptable to have bidets, this whole toilet paper thing would have been a non-issue.
You already know.
I'm just saying.
I'm a big bidet boy.
That's the first thing I'm buying when we actually get a house and everything. That's the first thing I'm buying.
You got to plug a bidet into that toilet. It'll change your life.
It will. Certainly will. Certainly will. God damn it.
A little off topic.
I feel like every time I was watching the Joe Rogan podcast recently, and they're like, he had Jimmy Wang on it. He was a pretty funny guy. He's on Silicon Valley. He was they're talking, and they're like, every comic starts out with talking about poop or just like, something stupid like that. So, this is how first we're still pretty new to this podcasting thing. So that's what we're just going to start talking about. That's what next episode's going to be about. Apparently is just poop the whole time.
Here I got some of this little off topic for we talked. It's kind of on topic, but we talked about not having crowds or not having fans attending sports games. Obviously, in Europe, they've picked back up with soccer. Premier League started back up today.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you heard about this or not. It was kind of a funny little story, but one of the first soccer leagues to start back up was the German soccer league, the Bundesliga. They played one game without fans, and it was so eerily quiet that the very next game they played, they had the stadium pumping in crowd noise just to make it seem more natural.
Hey, I mean, that's fair. That's technically, I mean, if it's like at your stadium, you can make whatever sound you want, right? I mean, in my opinion, I don't know if there's any rules, but
right. Yeah. And it was just, it's just crazy, and like I think about watching an NFL game. I know what an NFL game sounds like to me. And, there's a lot of white noise that blocks. You don't really notice because it's just part of the game. You always hear fans whistling and hooting and hollering before a snap. Mm-hmm. Or if there is an NFL season, if we watch the NFL, we're going to be able to hear the quarterback say everything. Everything's going to be clear. We're going to hear the offensive linemen grunt as they hit each other. We're going to
hear shit talking. We're going to hear shit talking from the wide receivers and the cornerbacks.
Right. Yeah, dude. It's going to be strange. I mean, it's going to be bizarre. I just I don't know what to expect at all anymore. I just I hold my breath and hope for the best.
Do you think it's possible? So John and I were talking about this on an earlier episode of maybe not necessarily like a drone, but like you're paying for a seat. We could hear Mason Rudolph. True. Yikes. We were talking about this on an earlier episode where, not necessarily you would be paying for, you'd be basically paying for your seat, and what would be at your seat in a stadium would be like your view of the field, right? So you're paying for seat G in row 35 of section A or whatever, right? Regardless of however high that would be. And that's your spot, like that you're looking at it right there. I think what if they took this a step further though? So like you could have your mic set up to your seat and like a headset and all that stuff, so you could actually interact with the with
You
the
know,
game as it's happening.
as fun as that sounds, I think it's a brilliant. I have 2 points, I guess. I think your bit, your 2 cents is brilliant. However, my beef with this is like, the best, watching a football game on the TV is the best view of a football game you're going
It
to
is,
get.
yeah.
You could spend thousands of dollars and get front row tickets to the 50-yard line. It's still not going to be as good as what you see on the TV. So, the idea for me, thinking of it where it's like, oh, we're gonna sell seats so people can watch it virtually. It's just like, no, come on. I'm just gonna watch the regular stream and get a better view. But I think the idea, the problem with that though, just coming from a technical standpoint, would be the amount of wiring and like microphones and like equipment that would have to be set up at every seat in the stadium. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, well, that's why it's a hypothetical. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
wouldn't there be feedback there, Dev? Can you
Yeah.
imagine, like 30,000 mics within a close proximity? We would create this sonic boom, and then
Well,
we
it would
happen
just
to
be speakers on their side. It would just be speakers on their side.
hey, feedback could still happen.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you're not wrong. But hey, it adds to the aura of the game, is what I'll say. That's my response to that. Oh my.
Interesting.
Hey, it's just a thought. Just a thought.
Mhm.
I did see, and I was. This was also on par with what John and I had discussed before. Was that I did actually look it up. So we were talking about how ticket sales, like how much of their percent revenue is part of that.
Mhm.
I did find out that 15% of the NFL's revenue is from ticket sales.
Wow. I mean, like,
From
yeah.
from TV and ads and stuff like that is 50% of their
Wow.
revenue.
What I worry about when it comes to ticket sales, period, is I don't worry about the NFL. They are when it comes to things I worry about the NFL, the organization themselves, I am not worried about one bit.
And the Jags were giving out free beer a few years ago to try and get people to
Right.
come and buy tickets. So
My thing is, it's where the stadium is, because like these stadiums, they're tax funded buildings. This is a place of work. This is where people get paid. The stadiums themselves make money from ticket sales and concessions and
right.
whatever else, whatever other kinds of money gets moved in there. That it's like, you know, the NFL, they could lose 15% of their profits. I could give a darn. But
Right.
think of like I think of the concession stands workers who are out of a job. I think of the stadium. They had that issue in St. Louis. The Rams moved because they couldn't fill seats in the stadium, and the stadium became just a backbreaker for the city. The city couldn't afford to keep the stadium there, essentially.
It's just sitting there. Yeah.
Right.
I think that's what
Right.
happened with the old Ford Field for the Lions too.
Right.
It's just a mess. It's just so much trickle down from all of this COVID stuff that is just getting crazier and crazier. The more you talk about it, the more you think about it, the more you start breaking it down from top to bottom, you just get to a point and you're like, this sucks.
It feels so helpless. Like, what do we do? What's the point? What are we trying? What are we going to try to do? It's like, I mean, not to get too crazy, but like this goes beyond sports too.
It does.
This, I mean, thousands upon thousands of businesses are being affected by this, and like, like I said, I was able to go get a tattoo last weekend, but the only reason I was able to do that was because I am personal friends with my tattoo artist. I've known the guy for a long time now, and I was texting him months ago before this tattoo. And I was like, "Hey, man, it's like he was out of a job. He wasn't tattooing because he couldn't." Yeah. So like, just being a friend and someone who's I wasn't any skin off my back. I Venmoed him money for a tattoo that I went and got, months later, and it's just like, like so many people have been affected by this, and it's I see it a lot in sports personally because that's what I'm so passionate about, and I can see how the sports world has been affected by COVID, but then you can take a step further back from that even, and you can just see how the globe, not just America as a country, America, we have our own issue with COVID, and it's on us, but the globe has just been ravaged, and it's just I, you know, all political bias aside, it's like this is a common enemy here. We should be doing a lot more as a country to combat this. Like, everybody wants sports back. Everybody wants something back from COVID. Everybody's been affected by this somehow, whether it was indirectly or directly, heaven forbid. Um, this COVID has gotten the best of us, all of us somewhere. And we as a country we managed to make it a bipartisan issue, and like we're
Yeah.
fighting over whether it's even real, whether if it's even, and it's just like, and it's just, why can't we all, granted, America has such a larger population than a lot of the other countries that have already gotten through the worst of their peak and have kind of slowed things down, but you know we shouldn't be we shouldn't be fighting with each other over, people will attack other people for wearing masks or vice versa even, and it's just like, pardon the hippy dippy in me, but it's like, can't we all just get along, like, can't we all just say, hey, this sucks, let's work together and try to get this so I can watch LeBron James again, so I can watch hockey again, it's just like, it it's just depressing. It's easy to get bummed out.
It is, but also we should still think about, you know, some of the positives. I mean, there's not
Hmm.
much, but they're there. They're there.
Hmm.
I mean, there's been times where, you've just been, well, I guess some of the meme things is like you didn't need an excuse to go not hang out with somebody.
Right.
If you
I
want to
mean,
be
well,
if you want to be meme funny about it.
but like, there are beautiful things that have come from this, and we have seen the community come together, to
Yeah.
support people, and like, the online community has flourished a lot in this. Like, like we talked about how esports has picked up tremendously. I was never someone who would have given esports the light of day, and now I'm an avid Overwatch League fan. I watched the May tournament, the May Melee. Uh, and it's like for me, that was like one of my silver linings. It was something that I was able to get into, and
Right.
obviously, um, there's been a lot of negatives, but one positive thing, it'll all affect us somehow, but at least I've gotten to spend plenty of time with my loved one, and my kitties,
Kitties, yeah.
and I'm just blessed enough to, yeah, I got my little boy up there on the stream.
That's right. That's right. And she
uh,
introduce him there, huh?
that's little Tuca. He's named after the Bruins goalkeeper of all people, and he's a lover, if you cannot tell.
Look at his face, dude.
Every morning when I wake up, I go do my morning ritual, and he has to be there in the bathroom with me. And as soon as I stand up to go get ready and dressed, I have to pick him up and hold him like that, or he won't stop. Like, he likes to jump at my legs, and he'll get rough. He'll put his claws into me if I don't pick him up and show him some love. So he's our little lover boy. He's a good kitty.
That is the cutest thing I've ever
Yeah,
heard.
yeah, yeah. He's a ball of joy.
That's awesome. All right, we're sitting at about an hour 20 here, so let's start to wrap this thing up. I think you made a lot of good points. I do think you made a lot of good points, and I think you're right. It just comes down to, hey, let's just. I said it on an earlier episode when we had Connor in, who Connor works at a hospital. Catch the
Right.
podcast. I think it was episode 3. Catch that one. Yeah, and we were kind of had the same conversation. Like, why does this disease have to be political? But it's just how sometimes Americans can be. But
You
it
know, and
is what it is.
it's I just, if anything, if I was to just give my 2 cents, is try to be a lot more patient in situations where you feel like you aren't, I guess. There's a lot of stuff. I mean, it's easy for anybody to get triggered over anything, no matter what your political
cancel
belief
culture is
is.
crazy too.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like, cancel culture is toxic, and it can really turn people, one of the things, and stop me here if it's something we shouldn't talk about, but the Black Lives Matter movement, and I've seen a lot of people who are very much in support of the Black Lives Matter movement attacking people who support the Black Lives Matter movement but aren't doing as much as others. And it's just like, guys, stop, stop being so nasty.
Right. Yeah.
If you can walk away with one piece of advice from my little hippie self, is just stop being so nasty. Treat somebody, even if it's hard, with an ounce of compassion. And I'm far from perfect, man. I've gotten cranky. I've yelled at people. I'm not a shining example for this, but like, if there's a good a time as any to just be compassionate and be empathetic with people, it's now.
Sure is. In the great words of Jackie Moon, ELE, everybody love everybody.
ELE, baby.
All right, you got a final thought. Where can people find you? Anything you want to promote? Anything you want to discuss?
Like I said, if you want to see my rantings on Twitter, follow me there at WeberWillDTD. Like I said, if there's anything I brought up tonight and you want to hit me up on it, you can don't be afraid to DM me. I'm a pretty bored guy right now. There's not a whole lot going on.
You heard it here first. His DMs are open.
My DMs are always open for the boys.
They are open for the boys.
But yeah, love one another. Be respectful and just try to keep your head up as hard as it can be nowadays.
That's right. Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, buddy, thank you for being on the show. I appreciate you. Like I said, we'll get this up on everywhere, so make sure you everybody out here, just make sure you follow the Twitch channel here. Make sure I am on YouTube as well. You can do exclamation YT in the chat, and you'll get the YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to that. Hit the bell so you know when every show goes live. It'll be there tomorrow morning. What else do I have? Twitter, Instagram, at TaterBoy09. That's all me. Follow me. I'm not as politically charged as maybe some of my fellow podcast guests here, but I'm kind of one of those people that will go out and just heart things that I agree with, but don't actually like retweet it or anything like that. So, it is what it is. Here's what it is. But yeah, we'll cut this one off here. Thank you again, Matt, for being on the show. Do appreciate you. And this is TaterBoy09 signing off, reminding you a minute spent in this chat is a wasted minute. So let's make this a damn good time. And I hope you had a damn good time today. Thank you.